He wants all the money tonight, or we going to rip your all the money. You got it. Krush Groove didn't ask for permission. It crashed the door. Language got sanitized. The real story got buried, and the club they filmed in got shut down permanently on the last day of shooting. These are 14 weird facts about Krush Groove. And a bonus 45 seconds nobody planned to shoot launched one of the biggest careers in hip-hop history. Turn up the box. This one hits different. Number 1. Russell Simmons turned down the film twice before agreeing to make it. The film that became hip-hop's defining cinematic document almost never got made at all. The first approach came from Harry Belafonte, who was developing what would become Beat Street. Simmons passed. He felt the project treated rap as a curiosity rather than a legitimate cultural force, and did not want his artists associated with it. Belafonte made Beat Street without him. The second approach came from Mam Goulan, the Israeli producer behind Brain and Breaking 2, who decided rap was his next target, and came looking for Simmons, who controlled nearly 20 acts. Simmons turned him down for the same reasons. Goulan figured rap was a dying fad and wanted to grind out a quickie before the moment passed. That framing was exactly what Simmons did not want. But the rejections gave Simmons a clearer picture of what he did want. A film on his own terms with his own people telling the actual story. He brought in producers George Jackson and Doug McHenry and went looking for a director. He wanted Michael Schultz, whose films Car Wash and High were among Simmons' favorites. Schultz came on board. Warner Brothers provided the funding. The film Goulan had wanted to make as a fad exploitation piece became something else entirely. Number 2, Columbia Pictures backed the film then dropped it. Warner Brothers stepped in. Getting Krush Groove made required surviving a studio abandonment before the cameras even rolled. Columbia Pictures initially agreed to back the project, then got cold feet. Previous music films had underperformed, and Columbia decided the risk was not worth taking. They walked away weeks before production was set to begin. Warner Brothers stepped in. Their reasoning was straightforward. The film needed a female love interest, and Sheila E was already a Warner Brothers Records artist. The label connection made the casting convenient, and the distribution relationship made the financing make sense. The Purple Rain factor was real, but secondary. Sheila E had recently come off the glamorous life written and produced by Prince, who had generated enormous returns for Warner Brothers the previous year. The studio was not blind to the promotional opportunity, but she was in the film first because they needed a woman, and she was already their artist. The Prince association was a bonus, not a strategy. The result was a casting decision that divided audiences. New York viewers responded to Sheila E's Minneapolis funk sound with audible hostility at screenings. Her segments were reportedly met with booing in New York cinemas. She was in the film because of a label relationship and a plot requirement. The artists who defined the scene had no say in it. Number 3. The entire film was made in 6 months because the artists were about to go on tour. The production timeline was not aggressive by choice. It was aggressive by necessity. Several of the film's principal performers had scheduled tours that would take them off the grid for months. The window to get everyone in front of a camera simultaneously was narrow and closing. Filmmakers had 6 months from green light to finished film before the window shut entirely. The working title was Rap Attack. The first draft of the screenplay was described by Simmons as being as much about a white girl trying to break into the music business as about the New York rap scene. He rejected it. Writer Ralph Farahar, whose television credits included Happy Days and Fame, wrote a second draft. Simmons approved it. The film shot for 26 days in April 1985 across the Bronx, Manhattan, and Queens at a cost of $3 million. Locations included the Marble Hill Projects in South Bronx, Silver Cup Studios, and the legendary Disco Fever Club. The production also needed to keep the artist's street slang authentic while making it accessible enough for audiences who had never heard it. Both demands had to be satisfied simultaneously in under a month of shooting. Number 4. Blair Underwood was the only professional actor in the lead cast, and it was his film debut. Every major act in Krush Groove played themselves. Run-D.M.C, the Fat Boys, Curtis Blow, Rick Rubin, Sheila E., the Beastie Boys, New Edition, LL Cool J, and Russell Simmons himself, who appears as a club owner named Crockett. The film had almost no use for conventional casting because the story it was telling was the story these people had already lived. The one exception was the lead role. Somebody had to play Russell Walker, the fictional stand-in for Simmons, and that somebody needed dramatic training. None of the artists around him had any. Blair Underwood was 21 years old with no feature film credits. Krush Groove was his debut. Gloria Schultz, the director's wife, served as acting coach to the musicians throughout production. Her job was to give performers with no screen experience enough foundation to function opposite the one trained actor in the cast. Underwood went from Krush Groove directly to LA Law. The role launched one of the more successful television careers of the late 1980s. Number 5. Russell Simmons wanted Fab Five Freddy to play him, and the producer said no. Before Blair Underwood was cast, Simmons had a specific person in mind for the role of Russell Walker. He wanted Fab Five Freddy Brathwaite, the hip-hop artist, graffiti pioneer, and downtown New York cultural figure who would later become the host of Yo! MTV Raps. The choice made sense. Fab Five Freddy existed at the intersection of hip-hop and the broader New York art world. He had credibility in the street culture the film was depicting and the cultural fluency to bring real dimension to the character. The producers disagreed. They wanted a trained actor for the central role. Underwood was cast over Simmons' objection. The result was a performance that many critics and viewers felt lacked the specific energy and street credibility that defined the real Simmons. Underwood was technically capable and professionally committed. He simply had none of the qualities that had made Simmons what he was. The character at the center of the film about hip-hop felt like the one person in the room who had not come from hip-hop, which in the end was exactly true. Number 6. The language was sanitized and Simmons wanted someone saying a profanity every 20 seconds. The tension between authenticity and commercial accessibility ran through every decision made on Krush Groove. Nowhere was it more visible than in the dialogue. The street slang of New York's hip-hop scene in 1985 was specific, dense, and entirely unfamiliar to most of the country. Warner Brothers wanted the film to reach beyond the Bronx and Queens. That meant the language had to be softened enough that audiences who had never heard a word of it could follow along. The artists hated it. Every sanitized line felt like a misrepresentation. These were people who had built careers on the specific texture of the way they talked and the way their community talked. Michael Schultz remembered Simmons' position clearly. If it had been up to Russell, Schultz said, somebody would have been saying a profanity every 20 seconds. The restraint imposed on the production was not artistic. It was commercial. The film that reached the widest audience was a cleaned-up version of the world these artists actually lived in. Most of them knew it, and most of them did not particularly like it. Number 7. Spike Lee tried to get hired as assistant director and was turned down. In the spring of 1985, Spike Lee was trying to raise money to make She's Gotta Have It. He needed funds, and he needed work. Krush Groove was in production across New York at exactly that moment. A film with a black director, black producers, and a subject that Lee understood instinctively. He approached the production about a job as assistant director. The paid work would have helped underwrite his own film. He did not get the job. She's Got to Have It was released in 1986 anyway, financed through other means, shot on a budget of approximately $175,000. It won the Youth Film Award at the Cannes Film Festival, launched Lee's career, and became one of the most significant independent American films of the decade. The production that turned him down watched him become one of the most important filmmakers of his generation 12 months later. It is still one of the more interesting what-if moments in 1980s black cinema. Two productions happening simultaneously in the same city, one turning away the man who would become the other's most celebrated contemporary. Number 8. The original story Simmons wanted to tell was about a DJ who was murdered. Before the fictionalized Def Jam founding narrative, before Russell Walker and the Love Triangle and the Loan Sharks, Russell Simmons had a different film in mind entirely. The story he originally wanted to tell was about Junebug, a DJ who had been a fixture at Disco Fever and who had been killed. Run-D.M.C's first album is dedicated to Junebug. He was a real person from the scene that Simmons had built his career around, and his death was the kind of story the community knew and carried. Simmons believed that story had the weight and specificity to anchor a film. It was not a generic rise to fame narrative. It was a specific tragedy about a specific person from a specific world that most of mainstream America had never seen on screen. The concept did not survive the production process. After rewrites driven by Simmons' own concerns and by the Fat Boys manager's desire to keep his clients' storyline separate, the story shifted to the safer fictionalized account of the label's founding. The murdered DJ disappeared from the script entirely. Junebug got a dedication on a Run-D.M.C album. He did not get a film. Number 9. The Disco Fever Club was shut down by authorities on the last day of shooting. Disco Fever at 1218 Jerome Avenue in the Bronx was not just a filming location. It was a cultural landmark. The club had been at the center of hip-hop's emergence in the late 1970s, a space where the music that would eventually reach the entire world was being invented in real time. By 1985, the club had fallen on harder times but retained its significance in the community. Owner Sal Abatello agreed to have scenes filmed there. His calculation was straightforward. The film would bring attention back to the venue and remind the city what Disco Fever had been. The spotlight the production brought was not the spotlight he had in mind. Local authorities took notice of the filming activity. On the last day of shooting, they arrived and shut the club down. The charge was operating without all the proper licenses and permits. Disco Fever never reopened. The club that had hosted the early development of one of the most globally significant cultural movements in American history was closed permanently on the same day the film that was supposed to celebrate it finished shooting there. Number 10. Fights broke out on set over who invented hip-hop, and Simmons grabbed a megaphone. One of the more remarkable moments during production had nothing to do with the film itself. It had to do with history and who owned it. During filming, tensions erupted between Black and Latino extras. The argument was about origin. Latino extras argued that hip-hop was a collaborative creation, a product of both Black and brown communities working together in the same neighborhoods. Black extras disputed the framing, arguing that the Latino influence came later and that credit for invention belonged elsewhere. The fighting was physical. Multiple incidents broke out. The tension became serious enough that the production was at risk of shutting down. Russell Simmons picked up a megaphone and addressed the crowd himself. His statement was direct. "It's Black invented," he said, "but now everyone is rocking to it, so let's stop fighting and finish this movie." It worked. The set calmed down. The film finished. The argument Simmons resolved with a megaphone in 1985 has never been fully resolved anywhere else. It is still being had in documentaries, academic papers, and comment sections 40 years later. Number 11. The film hit number 1 and sparked incidents across the country. Krush Groove opened in limited release, and the numbers that came back were not what anyone had predicted. 2 weeks after its release, the film was number 1 on Variety's list of 50 top-grossing films. A $3 million production about the early days of a rap label that most of mainstream America had never heard of was outperforming films with 10 times its budget. By the end of its run, it had grossed over $11 million domestically, nearly 4 times what it cost to make. Then things got complicated. Audiences at screenings across the country became unruly. The New York Post ran a front-page headline, "Movie Sparks New Teen Riot." The New York Times was more measured. 200 youths in brawl outside LI theaters showing rap film. Time magazine covered the incidents in a short and signed piece written entirely in rhyme. What the headlines did not capture was the context. The film is not violent. It is not provocative. It is a fairly semi-biographical musical about young people trying to build something. The incident said more about audiences who had been waiting years for a film that reflected their world than about anything on screen. Number 12. The film gets the history of Def Jam wrong in several significant ways. Krush Groove ends with a title card acknowledging that the Russell Walker character was inspired by the life of Russell Simmons. That acknowledgement does a lot of work because the film's version of events diverges from reality in ways that go well beyond dramatization. The film presents Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons as co-founders of the label from the beginning. In reality, Rubin founded Def Jam alone in his NYU dorm room in 1984. Simmons joined later. Larry Smith, the actual producer of Run-D.M.C's first 2 albums, is completely absent from the film. His production credits are given to Rubin, who did not produce those records. Rubin produced Run-D.M.C's 3rd album, Raising Hell. The financial struggles depicted were also fabricated. Simmons has acknowledged the money trouble subplot was invented for dramatic effect. The label was not in the kind of crisis the film depicts. Anyone who learned the history of Def Jam from Krush Groove would need to unlearn most of it. Number 13. Run and Russell Simmons' real father plays their preacher father in the film. The Reverend Daniel Simmons, the actual father of both Joseph Run Simmons and Russell Simmons in real life, plays the Walker brothers' preacher father in the film. In the scene, Run-D.M.C and Russell visit the church to ask his father for $5,000 to cover recording costs. The Reverend refuses. He tells his son that this is a test he will have to pass on his own. He is playing a fictionalized version of himself, delivering dialogue written for a film that misrepresents his son's actual history. The real father of the real people the characters are based on was cast to play a version of himself in a story that Russell Simmons himself has acknowledged was largely invented. The scene works. It has a specific gravity that comes from the fact that something real is happening inside the fiction. Reverend Simmons brings something to it that a hired character actor could not have provided. Number 14. The film's production helped Def Jam close its deal with Columbia Records. The timing of Krush Groove was not incidental to what happened to Def Jam in 1985. The film was in production in April 1985. Def Jam was simultaneously in negotiations to partner with a major label that could provide the distribution infrastructure the independent operation needed to scale. The label was talking to Columbia Records. According to the Cornell University Def Jam exhibition, the fact that a Hollywood film about the label's origins was actively being produced helped demonstrate Def Jam's commercial credibility at exactly the moment those negotiations were happening. A Wall Street Journal profile had already described Simmons as the mogul of rap. Now, there was a Warner Brothers film in production about his story. Columbia signed a distribution deal with Def Jam later that year. The partnership underpinned the label's commercial dominance through the late 1980s and into the 1990s, the era of LL Cool J, Public Enemy, the Beastie Boys, and Run-D.M.C's mainstream crossover. The film that misrepresented the label's history may have helped secure the deal that made the actual history possible. Bonus fact, LL Cool J was 17 and crashed the set until they put him in the film. LL Cool J was not part of the original production. He was 17 years old and had no screen credits and no guarantee that the people making this film had any interest in him. He showed up anyway. He kept showing up. He found out where they were shooting and arrived at locations uninvited and performed freestyles. He did this persistently enough that the producers eventually had a decision to put him in the film or keep turning away a teenager who is not going to stop coming back. They put him in the film. His appearance is approximately 45 seconds. He crashes an audition in a camel hat, tells his partner to hit the box, and performs the opening of I Can't Live Without My Radio in front of Jam J, DMC, Dr. Jackal, and Mr. Hyde and Rick Rubin. Jam J is furious about the intrusion. The room is won over anyway. It was LL Cool J's screen debut. The 45 seconds he inserted himself into a film that did not want him became one of the most discussed moments in the movie. Russell Simmons later described LL's persistence as a backdoor audition that became a staple of the production. The 17-year-old, who kept showing up uninvited, launched one of the most successful careers in the history of Krush Groove. Krush Groove cost $3 million, hit number 1, and introduced LL Cool J to the world in 45 seconds of footage nobody planned to shoot. It sanitized the language, fictionalized the history, and still managed to capture something real about a moment that was about to change everything. Drop a comment and tell us which film we should cover next. Thanks for watching.